Welcome to my channel. So today's topic of discussion is going to focus on permaculture. And permaculture has a basis in ethics. There's earth care of systems of the earth and the earth itself. So that means that we have to have some respect for mountains, rivers, streams, oceans, deserts, marshes, everything. We cannot disturb the environment in such a way that'd be detrimental to the rest of the environment. That would be ridiculous. We only have one earth to live on. Let's make it a paradise. The second ethic number 2, is people care. And people care is literally that. We take care of people and the systems the people use, so that way people can continue to be vibrant and enjoy life. And that includes our young and our elderly, as well as everyone in between. Without taking care of people, the systems we use could not be called permaculture. And the third ethic number 3, is originally was limits of consumption, but it switched to fair share, or what's now called return of surplus to the first 2 ethics. So when we get surplus, whether it's food, water, shelter, land, clean air, we return the surplus, because there isn't much, back to the first 2, and we enrich the first 2. So we enrich the earth and we enrich the people of the earth with any prosperity that we make. This does not mean to go broke. This does not have anything to do with bankrupting oneself to accomplish the mission. What this means is that we take surplus above our needs and we put it back into the system. So we could, for instance, we get a windfall of a lot of money, and what is in excess of us surviving for a long period of time on that money would go back to creating the benefits that would create more excess for us, more surplus. And as we create more surplus for the earth, and we create more surplus for the people, and we take that surplus, we keep putting it back, and it becomes a flywheel effect. Just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger and more beneficial. In the case that people do not understand what I'm talking about, if we take care of the earth, we can plant a seed in it. I'm going to use a seed as an example. We take the seed and we plant the seed in it. The earth is fairly fertile at that point. We water it a little bit, we give it a little care, and we protect it a little bit from predation. So stop things from eating it. We just do a little protection. If that one seed grows up to be an adult plant, and I'm going to use fennel as an example, that one seed could turn into an adult plant. The adult plant could grow up, and it could have, say, 100 flowers. And this is not accurate. I'm just using a roundabout number so people understand. And if each flower produced 10 seeds, that'd be 10 times 100, which would be 1,000 seeds. So your return on investment can't be matched anywhere except in life. 1 to 10,000 is 9,999 over 1 if the plant reached maturity, if it was not consumed, and if it did not get eaten by bugs or disease. That's one example of one plant. You can do the same with dill, parsley, mint, oregano. They give you a huge amount of seeds. Even tomatoes give you a huge amount of seeds if you actually took the seeds out of every tomato. That's a return of surplus back to the system. In the event that we were using rabbits or chickens or something, the population increase of the rabbits or the chickens would go back to the earth or the people, right? And we wouldn't have the chickens or the rabbits in such a surplus that they'd be detrimental to the surrounding environment or detrimental to the people that were raising them. They'd just be quantified just enough to maintain consistency. And if we wanted to breed them up and get more and start putting a surplus out there to help more people and to help the planet with the waste product from the animal, the feces, the feathers, whatever, their ability to scratch things and destroy compost piles. We could use that. We could use that in process to actually fertilize more fields, more fruits, and more land, and get a better harvest from the next year. So animals can be a benefit, not just a negative detractor. We could do the same thing with goats, cattle, bison. You name the animal and we can figure it out. Any animal can be of benefit if we target the animal in the right direction. But in the process of doing so, we have to provide for the animal also, because the animal is part of the system of the people or the system of the earth, and we don't want to destroy their habitat or overbreed them to the point where they're a detriment to themselves. So it's all about balance. And as we balance the system up, we can create an exponentially large function, and as that exponentially large function grows, we could employ people. We can create jobs to harvest food, to cook food, to package food, to take the waste away, to transport the food, to compost the waste. We could have whole amounts of systems. Anything that we can do in our modern world, we can work through the process from our ancestry forward. So these systems are not new. We have new little technologies like 2,000 years ago, we didn't have wired mesh. We didn't have hardware cloth or chicken wire to contain animals and keep them from being predated on. And yes, the populations were much smaller 2,000 years ago, but we can use technologies from 2,000 years ago and bring them forward into today's technology and then bind them and get them to link together and be stronger than any one system could have been all on its own. We have interesting processes. We have fuels. We have ways to create fuels. We have different fuels. Those fuels can be put through machines. Machines can make things more efficient. We can use old school technology and new school technology, and we can combine them together to make better hedgerows, fields, ditches, swales, terraces, without indenturing humans into servitude to accomplish it. We can get the humans to be of benefit. We can feed them, clothe them, house them, give them an income, bring prosperity to them and their family, educate them, train them, work with them, and not compete against them. We can do those things, and that's just the tip of the iceberg on what we can do with people. People are the most fascinatingly creative members of the globe, as far as I can tell, in the animal kingdom. Humans, we can do anything from create seed balls to creating nuclear weapons and everything in between. Some of the stuff that we do is highly disrespectful. For instance, I'm not interested in nuclear power, nuclear weapons, going down that path. I think that there's a negative side effect to nuclear power that is not accounted for in the upfront cost of the creation of the power source. And I believe, me personally, I believe, as well as I know, I'm very well convinced and understanding of the physics of how to get a turbine to spin, we can use other methods of heating water without using radioactive isotopes and huge combinations thereof. That does not mean that nuclear doesn't have a place. It just has a small place. Something for research, for scientists, for understanding how things work. There can be advancements in nuclear science. I'm not 100% against nuclear physics. We need to understand it. We have it. It can be a resource if used properly. As we're going currently, we're creating more toxins out of nuclear waste than we are creating benefit for our globe. So, measuring, don't know, it's up to you. On the other hand, we could sit there and we could create seed balls with clay and a little bit of dirt and a compost and seeds, and we could spread those far and wide, and we could gently vegetate deserts over time and get them back into a stable ecological state without killing the flora and the fauna that's currently there. It would shift it, yes, but there's shifts already happening. This has to be clearly understood. Not all current deserts used to be deserts. Deserts in very specific areas used to be forests. And just because we don't personally remember that they were forests 2,000 years ago does not mean they were not forests 2,000 years ago. Because we don't have an archaeological notation or a historical note that said that was a forest does not mean it was not a forest. It means that we probably cleared it and didn't let anybody know because we were probably hoarding the materials, and we were probably advancing military causes or civilization in such a way that is detrimental to the local area. And after 2 generations, nobody remembered there was a forest there to begin with. They always thought it was desert. So we have to remember that the ability to create deserts is very easy. All you have to do is denude the landscape of any vegetation. You'll turn anything into a desert. Doesn't matter where it starts. Doesn't matter if you're in the Amazon or if you're in near the Arctic Circle. If you have a forest and you remove the biology out of it, you're going to create a desert. It may be an ice desert, or it may be a sand desert, or it may be a swampy desert where there's no life, but there's not going to be anything there. And so we have to be extremely careful. And, there's obviously swamps and deserts are not the same thing. We're not going to have a swamp called a desert. That would be ridiculous. But what I'm saying is that the removal of the ecosystem, removal of the plants and vegetation can lead to a very barren area. We're just calling a barren area desert, something that doesn't grow vegetation. It doesn't even matter if it could be the seafloor. And if we denude the seafloor of living organisms and we take away the balanced ecosystem by trawling underneath the waves where nobody can see it, and the ecosystem is destroyed there on the seafloor bottom, we've done the same thing as removing a large, vast area of forest. So it takes a very long time for the seafloor bed to repair itself, and people are not talking about that. As human population grows, our consumption grows. We can moderate our consumption, and we can alter the food sources we use so we don't strip mine the ocean or strip mine any food source, river, lake, ocean, prairie, forest, swamp, desert. Everything has food in it, if you know what you're looking for. We just don't want to make everything dead. That's really basically simple. Over extraction of resources is going to cause everything to be dead. And whether we like that idea or not, it is the truth. Over extraction of resources of animals, plants, funguses, insects. Ask China. Mao Zedong. Ask them. What'd they do? Why did 60 million of their people starve to death over a sparrow? Because the sparrow would, quote unquote, eat the grain. No. The sparrow was eating the bugs that were causing the grain to be destroyed. And when they got rid of the sparrow, their harvest failed because the bugs came in and destroyed their crops, and 60 million people starved to death. And Stalin didn't do much better by hoarding all the wheat and rice and food crops to Moscow and causing 25 million of his own people to starve to death. These are governments in their own societies. And Germany didn't do much better than Russia and Moscow, and starved 5 million of their own people to death. So we don't want that. And that doesn't even include America. I mean, America starved millions upon millions of people to death as the Western European culture overran Northern America's territory, and the people there were pushed out of the way, and their food sources were destroyed, intentionally or not, doesn't matter. Their food sources were destroyed. The way they could gather food and prepare food was destroyed, and they were moved into regions where they couldn't maintain the same cropping of the same food sources, and that doesn't include disease, war, any of the other things. We're just talking about the food sources. One of the most dramatic results that were detrimental to the natives of Northern America, because they're not Americans. We have to remember that. One of the most detrimental things to them was the introduction of the earthworm. Everybody says, well, that's an innocuous little worm. You're right, it is. And it was mostly a compost worm that was causing the error, because compost worms and earthworms do two different things, but we call them earthworms, but it could have been compost worms. What happens is that the natives of the Northern American forest area used to have a technique for cutting a plant and sticking it in the ground, and it would propagate, and that was their food source. Well, when the Europeans came along, they brought their little plants with their food source, and the plant had an innocuous little worm that really did a lot of benefit for that plant, because the plant started off as a seed, didn't start off as a cutting. And when that worm got into the native soils of northern, what's called America, that worm propagated and populated the area, and every time it came across one of the natives' cuttings, it would burrow into it because it was eating the dead material that was rotting a little tiny bit from the cutting, in which case the cutting could not take root, and the cutting would fail and die. And suddenly a practice of growing food from cuttings for thousands of years became impossible, and they did not understand why. They had no education as to how to correct the error of this worm coming in and eating their crop out, which only one generation, only 20 years, it only takes one generation to forget a technology. And they forgot what to do because what they had been doing for thousands of years failed. And they starved. And it's not the only case. It's not the only reason why they starved. There's a plethora of problems that came along with Western Europeans, my ancestors, that brought problems forward into the New World. And the earthworm was a great example of something that hadn't been studied until the late 1990s on its effects of indigenous population food sources. And it comes out to be found that if you take a cutting, clip, and you stick it in dirt, and there's an earthworm near it, or in this case, a compost worm near it, it'll eat the vegetation as compost, and it'll never take root. We've learned, current day Americans have learned, take the cuttings, put them in sharp sand and a little bit of compost, and when they start sprouting roots, then we plant them, and then the earthworm can eat that dead material out, but the roots are there, and earthworms and compost worms do not eat live material. They do not eat the root set. So the plant can thrive and go on, and we can grow our plants from cuttings if we start them in a substance that doesn't have the worms in it. Let's train people. Hey, let's train the natives of the Northern American continent how to grow food again with newer technologies, with old techniques, with their old food sources. I got no problem with that. They can have their steaks and their beef and their potatoes and whatever they want, but we could also reintegrate their original food sources and see if they would take up that practice and benefit themselves from thousands of years of history. I think that's a good thing. I think learning from the past and the mistakes that we created as humans, generally broad-scale humans, all across the board. It doesn't matter if we're from Africa, China, India, Japan, Europe, America, South America, North America. It's irrelevant. Humans create errors, and we can learn from them and grow forward and help the next generation. Can't do anything about the past, but we can work towards the future. So propagating food is of critical importance. And learning how to propagate food and train people how to propagate their food is very easy. And it should be everybody. If we want our society to work better, and we do. We want Russia's society to work better, and we do. We want Europe's society to work better, and we do. And Africa and China and India and South America. We want them to be better. America is one of the most fantastic places to gain knowledge, to gain expertise, to collaborate with people that are willing to help, because we help everybody. So here we go again, helping everybody. Here's an American helping you, and it costs you nothing. And it doesn't matter if you're an Inuit or an Arapaho or a Cheyenne. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you're Chinese or Japanese or European or Asian or Afghanistan or Indian, or it doesn't matter if you're from Cambodia or if you're from Jerusalem. It's irrelevant. You're human. And humans can help each other. We don't have to be in conflict. We can be in cooperation. We can work together. Okay? We can shake hands. We can be at peace with each other. All we have to do is work together gently and not be rude to other people and help them grow more food. And as we help them grow more food, we create more community. And as we create more community, we get less strife. And as we get less strife and we create more community, it builds upon itself, and we train more people, and the people train each other. And this is one of the core concepts of permaculture. It's actually a training system inside of a design system, inside of a science system. We're not here for your belief system. That's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about whether you're Christian or Jewish, or if you're Muslim, or if you're, it doesn't matter. If you're Hindu, it doesn't matter. We want to train you how to grow food. We don't care about your religion. We don't care about any of its dictates or its issues with other religions. We don't care. We want you to be more prosperous, and we want to do it straight across the board. We want everyone to participate. We want everybody to work together and have gentle caring of each other, gentle caring of the earth. It's very simple. We need to learn from our failures of our past. Okay? And we need to work towards a better future where we all work together. And we don't hold on to negative feelings of the past. Let's move past that. Let's evolve, because we're modern Cro-Magnon man. We are Homo sapiens sapien. All of us. We're beyond Neanderthal. We're well beyond Cro-Magnon man. We've got frontal lobes are highly sophisticated thinking devices. Okay? We can observe the world around us and recreate it however we want within reality. So, that being said, working with nature, working with people are part of nature, working with the systems of nature, the rivers, the streams, the oceans, the ponds, the lakes, the mountains, the deserts, the forests, the ecosystems, the swamps, the lowlands, the highlands, the Arctic plains, all of it. Everything. We can work with all of it. We can reduce our negative impact so easily and turn it into a positive impact where we have a positive benefit. We can do it. It's just as easy to have a positive impact as it is to have a negative impact. So let's have the positive impact. The more people that grow trees, the more people that grow their own gardens and forests and food. And okay, hold on. Let's switch thinking for a second. Let's go over a little bit. Let's go to fishing. If we could create systems like the native Hawaiians did, and they may not call themselves Hawaiians. We call them Hawaiians, okay? They may have different names for their families. I'm just using that as a generic term that's known in America. So we take the people's teachings from history of how they take from the system of their mountain as it works its way down in prosperity, all the way down, and they had more fish in their little ponds in the mountain than they did out of their lagoons out in the bay. But if we take the nutrient cycle from the top of their mountain and we just cycle it all the way down the way they did for, thousands of years, and all the ponds and reeds and taro and all the food sources and grasses and whatever fruit that they're eating, and we bring it all the way down to their fishing area in their lagoon that they created. And they created these shallow little lagoons where when the tide went out, the fish were trapped, the large fish were trapped. Small fish could get out, but the large fish were trapped. They couldn't get out over the reefs, the artificial reefs, or through the cuts in the reefs to let the water out so there's no erosion of the system. And then they could come in and just scoop up the fish they wanted, not the fish they didn't want. They could be selective because it was, the water's yay deep suddenly. You can just pick up the fish and throw it in your net or your basket. And they could collect only what they needed without killing all the other fish and then go home. And that little lagoon could be a breeding ground for more fish without destroying the ecosystem. Yes, they had to build out the ecosystem there and change the ecosystem. I agree. But it worked in the fish's benefit because they never ran out of fish. They're highly prosperous. And that was not the only place they did that. That was just the one that we know of. I mean, the Tongans probably had it. The Papua New Guinea probably had systems like that. We just don't have the historical relevance in a book that says so. Whereas we do have it for Hawaii and the Hawaiian culture. The one of the most fantastic historical relevant systems of food production that was ever found, and I could be misquoting, so bear with me on this. It's about the concept, not the necessarily location or the people. So if I get it wrong, it's okay. The concept's what's necessary to get across. We need the concept to pass, not worry about the facts so much. Okay, the facts are necessary, but if I get them wrong, it's okay. I don't have the context in my hand. I'm only working off my memory of what I was shown. Now, the system's called a Chinampa system. And what it is it's a divot of earth, and then a mound of earth, and then a divot of earth, and a mound of earth, and a divot of earth, and a mound of earth. And it was enough to ride a canoe through the divot, which was filled with water. And that was aquaculture. And from what I remember from the teachings that I had, the Spaniards went to Mexico City, and they thought they'd found a massive swamp. Technically, I guess they kind of did. Because 50% of the landmass was water, and 50% was land in the non-lived areas. So anything that wasn't housing was a waterway, and then a walkway, and then a waterway and a walkway. And people were canoeing around, and they were harvesting tons of material from these systems. There's fish, and there's vegetables and fruits, and they're just harvesting it, putting it in their canoe, and then rowing to a place, and then offloading it to a cart with their version of an oxen or something, and then transporting it to the centralized city and feeding 1 million people. It was the first documented case of a city that the Spaniards had found. Probably not the first city that's had 1 million people, but the first one where the Spaniards found in the New World of a 1 million plus population that didn't have any war because they're too busy feeding each other and eating and having a great time, having a party. We could easily get back to that. The Spaniards thought it was a mess and drained the swamp and indentured the people into servitude and caused Mexico to become a third world nation ever since. We can blame the Spaniards for that, or we can sit there and learn from the experience of the Spaniards and say, hey, you know, that was a really bad mistake back then, draining those chinampas and taking away the food source of those indigenous people and creating a lot of famine and waste and heartache and wars. We can blame them for that. Or we can learn from the experience and say, man, Spain, you messed up, but we're going to learn from it. We're all going to work together. We're going to recreate the Chinampa systems, maybe not in Mexico City, but anywhere else in the world that it would work, that would be reasonable to do. And we can recreate those ditches and those mounds, and we can recreate the food systems. And as we recreate the food systems, everybody prospers. Now, in our technology systems today, we can set it up on video, we can set it up on YouTube, we can set it up on live chat, we can set it up on computers, we can train, literally train millions of people at a time, day after day after day. There's 8 billion plus people on this planet right now, and we need to be training millions a day to do this. And a lot of people don't recognize that cell phone, this saturation set, cell phone. Cell phones are owned by about 80% of the population of the planet. There are people in Africa at an 80% saturation rate 20 years ago with cell phones that operated and worked. 20 years ago, this is 2024, back in 2004, the numbers were 80% of the population of Africa had working operational cell phones, but only 40% had working operational water sources. They had more phones than they did water. And then that probably hasn't changed much. If anything, the cell phone saturation's probably gotten higher because everybody's got a cell phone now. But the education that I'm talking about should be higher too, because now that everybody has cell phones and YouTube and access, they can get the information from you or from me, and they can disseminate the information without causing any harm. Well, minus the use of power and burning fossil fuels and coal. But in the process of doing that, we can actually benefit the whole world by getting each one of those individuals to plant a tree, to grow a garden, to reduce their waste, to increase their benefit to the planet, and to train more people to grow more stuff. So it's actually a benefit. It's a greater benefit than it is a detraction if we think about it correctly. I'm willing to think about it correctly, and I'm willing to work with people to think about it correctly. This is the idea of permaculture. It's to help others learn and train and succeed and use science and, find ways to solve problems instead of just dwelling, oh my God, the problems, oh, the weight of the universe is upon me, I'm collapsing. Oh, get over it. Yes, we all have hard times. Everyone does. Doesn't matter if you're in China, Mexico, America, Polynesia, it doesn't matter. If you could be Japanese and have a hard time. You'd be Chinese, Indian. There's always a class of people that have a hard time. That does not mean we have to keep that going. We can grow food. So, I focus on swales and swale introduction. And the reason that I do that is because I think it's a great introduction into permaculture and how to start a process where we use water, access, structures. But we have to find water first. And water's the one that's getting really, really tricky to get. Water's becoming really hard to find pure. So we need to focus on water. So I started focusing on swales because swales, they're like the multi-tool of gardening techniques. Landscape repair, whatever you want to call it. I focus on the idea of earth repair, water aquifer resaturation, underground aquifer saturation. I want to get water back under our soils. I believe that from my point of view, and it's not a belief system, it's more of knowledge. We have to remember, I say the word believe, but I actually mean I know. I have actual knowledge that we can penetrate more water under subsoils. Every year, we can increase the potential of benefit to the trees, the ecosystems, and the farmers. We can benefit the planet, we can benefit the people of the planet just by using techniques like swales. I'm going to give you some numbers that are kind of crazy. But if you go back and you do your research, or you get a mathematician to check my numbers, they may come up with similar numbers. And so I'm going to give you some information that people don't typically know. For every 1 square mile of hard surface runoff, whether it be roofs or asphalt or concrete, for every square mile in one rain event to 1/16 of an inch of water that sleets from one side of that hard surface to the other side and leaves the hard surface without penetrating, for every square mile, that's 1.086 million gallons of water passing that 1 square mile surface at 1/16 of an inch of rain. Now, in America and many modern countries, first world nations, that amount of water is actually problematic for flooding and for infrastructure and for fields and farming and fruit and food and stuff. And we've designed over the last couple hundred years, since America was founded in 1776, that's 248 years, we've designed a system where that water runs straight to the largest body of water and goes to the ocean as fast as is possible. We've also done that with our waste cycle, our waste streams, our power generation stations dump all their waste into water systems, and that goes straight to the ocean. We've done all our feces and all our waste sewer streams into the same bodies of water straight to the ocean as fast as we can. Some of it's treated, some of it's not. And all our chemical byproducts from industry, all the pollution from creating modern technology, whether it's metals, plastics, glass, aluminum, concrete, asphalt, cars, trains, planes, automobiles, houses, doesn't matter. We put it into the same waste stream going to the ocean. And the solid materials we put into landfills, and then the solid materials become a waste stream of their own and create a leaching of the waste stream into the water system, and then we have to deal with all that. Again, problem. We have solutions. We can start slowing that water matriculation so that way we're not sending chemicals as fast to the ocean by not having so much water flow to the ocean. And we can start switching back and forth the water flows through our communities, through swale sets, getting it to touch more landscape and more gardens and more fields and more forests, and just back and forth as it goes downhill, and just slow it down, just matriculate it slower and slower and slower and slower until it gets to pure flat land before it falls into the ocean, which it eventually will. But in that process, it's going to start taking out all the contaminants, all the plastics, all the metals, all the toxins, all the chemicals. It's going to start stripping it out because the biology will just consume it. And we have great studies on funguses consuming high-level toxins. And I'm not talking about small baby toxins here. We're talking dioxin, VX. We're talking diesel fuel spills, gasoline spills. We're talking heavy-duty plastics. The funguses are starting to consume that because they can put out acids and enzymes to eat the carbon molecules out of that, and chew it up and create their fruiting bodies out of it. And then an animal can come along and disseminate it and travel 20 miles away. And if it's toxic, the animal dies. but the animal has ingested it and it starts binding up the toxin into the carbon linkage chain and making really long carbon chains out of these toxins and bringing them into an inert matter. Certain things cannot become inert. For instance, radioactive isotopes, they get to spread out. They're not going to become inert because they're going to keep putting out radiation. But the solution to pollution is dilution, and we need to dilute those problems as far as we can and not recreate them. That's key, not to recreate the problem. Mushrooms are a great biological sponge for high-level toxins. They found in Chernobyl, next to the elephant's foot, a fungus growing on the wall where nothing else could live because radiation was just too high. It was just too hot in that room. The elephant's foot is the corium of the meltdown of Chernobyl's reactors, pouring liquid, solid fuel, uranium and plutonium into the bottom of a pit and melting its way through iron and concrete and whatever other metals and substance, copper and anything that was in that reactor system, and just going into the earth and just taking everything with it and just melting it into this amalgamation that turned into what looks like an elephant foot. And that's what we call it. Oddly enough, the radiation diminished due to the contamination of other materials. So it's become less radioactive over time because there's a dilution factor even in the elephant's foot of the granite and the concrete, the sand and the concrete, the silica, the metals, the lead, the zinc, the silver, the gold, anything that was in there started contaminating the elephant's foot and started getting in between and becoming a moderator, weird as that sounds, to the reaction because it's getting in the way of the molecules being too close together. So we can actually break that up and spread it out and break it up and spread it out and break it up and spread out. And we'd reduce the elephant's foot contamination and we could suck it up with a vacuum. But that's not the point. The point is, as they were studying the elephant's foot, they looked on a wall and they found a fungus growing. And the fungus was growing, absorbing the radiation, using it as a fuel source because they don't photosynthesize. So it's using it as an energy source to eat the rock that it was and the metal that it was attached to. And it had a lot of melanin in it, or melatonin or melanin, the pigmentation in skin. I could have the name wrong. Come on, let's go. Forget about the minor things. Let's go to the big things. Anyways, the pigmentation inside this fungus protected it from the high levels of radiation and the heat that were in the room, and it was the only thing growing. It's the only thing that could grow was a fungus. And that was a interesting study, and when they figured that out, they started testing around Chernobyl for other funguses, and they found one that was uptaking cesium at 10,000 times the background radiation, putting it into its fruiting body, concentrating the cesium, and then a boar or a wild animal would come along and eat that and then travel, and they'd be poisoned by the cesium and they'd die. But less cesium was concentrated in that surrounding area. It was spread out thinner and thinner and thinner and diluting the cesium problem through the carbon chain, the carbon cycle. Is it a perfect system? No. It's better not to have that problem in the first place. But we learned some stuff from the problem, and now we're working forward through that system. We're saying, hey, we have biological regeneration systems that we can utilize to fix really critical toxins. Man-made plastics, diesel fuel, VX, pathogens. There are funguses that eat E. coli and Staphylococcus and listeria and other wastes, including consuming viruses. They're finding oyster mushrooms that are eating viruses that nothing else is touching. So nature has a way of recovering even from human activity because humans are part of nature. And we make some mistakes and we can correct for them because we can train each other on these systems. Now, there's nothing wrong with training each other. The easiest thing, as far as I'm concerned, is digging a swale and planting food in it. That's pretty easy, pretty simple, pretty non-invasive, non-problematic, and I'm getting really good results out of it. So I'm working on spreading the word to solve these minor issues and these major issues and create a better planet. It's more viable with better resources that we want, and training more people to have a better outlook, better forward-thinking mindset, and really just to have better lives. That's my rant for today. If you like this kind of content, leave a comment below. If you've enjoyed 45 minutes of me talking, subscribe. If you've really enjoyed my talking, don't know why you would, share it with a friend. I don't know why they would enjoy me talking, but hey, share it anyways. If you really, really, really like this kind of information, you've got more of your own, create a YouTube channel, share your information, send me a link. I'd be glad to look at it. Again, if you have questions or comments, leave them below. Like, subscribe, thumbs up, whatever you got to do to make my channel grow better. Have a great day.